Hi everyone and welcome to the first episode of How to Rebel. My name is Darren
I'm Gugu.
And I'm Jade.
and we've come to the conclusion that as a country we need therapy.
And I think the government needs to pay for it. Like, and it's in
I mean,
some
we
way.
can start with Poloni that tried to kill us. What else was there? The army tried to make us do push-ups.
we had
Gigaba sent
I
us
was
a dick
about
pic.
to say he
Guys,
said
we
the
had a
entire
finance
country.
minister for a weekend.
The
we
weekend
did,
special.
We did.
We had, I think we had maggots in the water at one stage.
Yeah,
And then there
didn't
was
y'all
a
have
shortage
water
of that
cuts?
as well
Shortage
water
of
cuts.
water.
Yeah, in Cape
y'all
Town.
didn't have water
Absolutely.
here for a while.
in South Africa.
By the ocean, we didn't not have water. We were
We were just-
water,
Restricted.
you know,
Yes.
Is that the word that we're gonna use?
that kind of
Restricted.
thing. Then there was also somebody fell off the chair.
Hlanhla Nene. That was that episode of him falling off the chair
Wow.
and giving us a budget speech. Also, when we received
Wow.
budget speeches with music in them, we gonna be right. Didn't
That was also Gigaba. That was.
I think they need to just give us therapy for all the second-hand embarrassment that we suffer as just being a South African citizen. Outside the trauma, just for being so embarrassed.
buy
That
them?
second-hand embarrassment
No,
for
for
me,
real.
I'm like, somebody must
It's very
pay
hard.
for this. It's unnecessary.
I think when we talk about it, it sounds like a sitcom, and we're like, no, this is our political climate.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
are like, oh, what? Really? Is this a series you're talking about? No, this is just
actually-
life here.
It's actually quite a joke.
And then yesterday we gave weapons to Russia, but we didn't give weapons to Russia, but
Someone
the
was
rand
willing to
didn't
die in
feel
it.
that effect.
And all these planes, that's just another, that's a boat in this instance, but there are the boats and the planes just randomly, here from the Guptas to, what's the other guys it was? What were they doing?
Saudis.
Guys,
It's been a journey. And so I think like the consensus that we come to is that we need to rebel against the system
in all fronts.
in so many different ways.
In all fronts.
What
I
does
think,
that,
like-
what does that look like to you though? What is rebellion? Because it could be interpreted as a lot of things, but what is it that you would say is rebellion?
Yeah. I think like immediately when you hear the word rebel, it has like this negative connotation to
Exactly,
it. Like
that's what I'm like
immediately think
to
of
find it
like a naughty child or somebody who's trying to break the rules and that kind of thing. And in many ways, yeah, like
Yes, exactly. That is
you know
rebellion
what I mean?
too. But to me, rebellion is absolutely everything that stands against any established norm, from religious doctrine all the way down to how we dress, all the way up to hell, I don't even know, music and the music that we listen to,
Yeah.
and the ties that it has to absolutely everything in the past 1,000 million years, ever since we started interacting with one another. There's always some conformity, there's always a rule, there's always some hegemony that's there. And
Yeah.
as long as there's that type of structure, there's always going to be us rebels.
Yeah.
In a lot of senses, tattoos were seen as a big form of rebellion for the longest of time. And it's still considered like as a, I think, I don't know, you have more visible ones than I do. I don't know,
I
is
know what
yours
you're
more
talking
visible?
Both of y'all
Do you
can
still
make
get the
tattoos.
same types of,
For
like-
sure, for sure. And I think it's just such a crazy concept, even that sticking to the rules is a good thing, but wanting to seek new ways is a bad thing. Like, how did we get to the point in society where trying to find your own path is bad and walking on the set path is a good thing? And I think that just speaks to like rebellion being, like you say, defying the norm, which is not a bad thing. I think it's trying to look outside of the system and to look outside of the set path. I think it's creativity.
It
I think
is.
it's
and it's
innovation.
being able to determine how the current path isn't working for you,
Yeah.
right? And I think always finding an alternative will have conflict. It doesn't matter which way you look at it, because the second you have people move outside of what is their norm, it becomes unknown, right?
Yeah.
And then anything, it doesn't matter if it's 10, 15, 20 years later, that rebellious thing becomes a norm.
Yeah.
Now it's different, but at any point when you have it, I guess there will be some form of conflict as well that goes with that, because people are being asked to go outside what they consider normal. So we've also had like tons of examples of that throughout, I think, not just our history, but in general, that we can look at and see what rebellion looks like and What does that mean, and what was the outcomes or results of that then?
I think Zuleika Patel was one of like the most relatable forms of rebellion. I think you know but more about that than I do, yeah?
Yeah, no, it happened at the Pretoria Girls High, and they were doing the hair regulations. They wanted us black girls, and I say us because it's also something that I experienced as well in high school, where they would make us either tie our hair, they would regulate how our braids look. We were not allowed to have hair styles. Like our natural hair could never be up. We always had to plait it. There was nothing else, either that or straighten it, and it was also not passed. Like they were all ridiculous. So when a 13, 14-year-old girl
Yeah, she's
and
really
her
young.
friends gets together and say, we're not going to change our hair. And the small little speck starts an entire international movement about black girls and their hair. That's a beautiful form of rebellion. And that's the problem, though, with the norms as well, because the established norm is the problem. That's why there is so much rebellion. It doesn't take much to be rebellious. Being who you are is rebellious. Even if something as simple as our hair is something that we have to fight against, something that we have to wear, something that just pops out of your head the way that it pops out of someone wants to tell you that you must straighten it so you can look good in a uniform. I must alter my body.
As a concept, that sounds wild. Like when you say it like that, like it pops out of your head, and that's
And
rebellious.
Just as that, like my one friend had an afro, and they encouraged her to like cut her hair because it was unseemly and it made the uniform look bad. We even had a teacher that grabbed a girl's braids for saying that they were too long.
So who you are and how your body just exists.
That's
Just
wrong.
being a free-formed human being is
Rebellious.
Your weight, being a fat person who loves their body.
That's crazy. I think we were having a chat about it, and you were talking about the Soweto uprising and what the.
Yes, even that. It's people's freedom to speak and use their languages. And not just that, it's always a wild concept to me that that is something that has been chosen on your behalf. And it didn't just it wasn't just confined to that. And people's freedom to use their own and be taught in their own languages instead of, like at the time it was Afrikaans specifically, right? But expecting somebody to comprehend teaching in a completely different language to what is native to them and test them in a way that you would test people that is native to that language and expect them to have the same success outcome and like way to measure it to me still today is something that rubs me up really wrong. But the Soweto uprising wasn't just a thing where it was like, listen, this is impacted and what I think was great about it was that 160 townships across the country in 4 months all went, nah, this is it, guys. We are done. And a lot of people lost their lives just so that something as basic as how you teach somebody and expect them to comprehend what it is that you are teaching them should not be in a way that is native to them. Mm-hmm. It is, it blows my mind.
That, like, exactly. I'm just thinking, as somebody whose first language is English, how privileged I was to grow up and learn in a language that I immediately understood, and somebody saying, hey, I want to learn as well, but I need to learn in this language. And it's like, how dare you? Mm-hmm. What?
And the funny thing is, as well, in our tongues, in my tongue especially, my mother tongue, we have a lot of functional verbs and a lot of the way that we structure the language is not the way that the English language. It's not a subject, object, adverb, whatever. Everything is in motion, and so are you. So to go somewhere, kufamba, but to go somewhere with someone, like they're not exactly the same. They're not structured the same, and that reflects in how we speak English. That's why there's a lot of Black South African English where you say things like next of next week and those types of things. That's because in our language, those things aren't next of next week. It's a period that we already have. So to be able to comprehend English actually requires us to deconstruct our own languages. Because like kufamba, kufambisa, to go, you are going. Kufambisa is to send. Okay. But it's the same word, the same root structure, the same, and it just is the function of it changes, as opposed to go somewhere and then have the opposing word to send. You kind of just use your body, what is next to you, the proximity, and you put it in motion. That's just how we speak. Like, we don't even have like a morning. In my language, morning is Mahlamandlop, where the elephants wash. That's the time the elephants get ready, not necessarily break of dawn morning. So you have that language that is basically descriptive, that gives you this beautiful painting of how things look. And then you have to go to something as basic as, I love you.
That's wild.
Where you can say things like Muranzi wana Kuranza, which is the love, like, you know, like Muranziwa itself. Kuranza is to love. Muranzi was the owner of my heart.
Yeah. And I can't even imagine how limiting the learning experience becomes when you can't understand it in that way anymore.
So you have to unpack, decode your language, learn it in a basic way, and then that must be transcribed into maths.
And this was rebellious.
Science.
To want to learn in your native tongue.
It was worth people being violently shot and killed in streets.
We're not talking about locking a door and saying you can't come in.
No.
It was a violent sort of conflict against people wanting to be taught and having things as simple and as basic as educational material printed in a different language. Because remember, outside the Bible, there was English and Afrikaans, period, as mediums. You couldn't find anything in any other language in a print medium to learn from at the time, because print was mostly the thing then. We didn't have digital, but there was no access for people to be able to learn in their own languages, and it stretches to everything that you are and become after that. The workplace, which is why labor forces started also joining in on the very same thing, because it impacts you beyond that. And it's not just learning, it's also using and expressing. Even today in some workplaces, they will simply say, you speak English here, or you speak Afrikaans here. That's it.
And it's just accepted.
Exactly.
You take it as it is.
Even though the most spoken languages in this country is Zulu and then Xhosa, I think.
Even when I worked at my first job at lawyer, and that is very much, I don't want to say it, but it's very much still very white. And in all of us, especially as Black legal children, I guess, when we went into articles, we went into Afrikaans-speaking articles, especially in Gauteng. You had to go into Afrikaans firms, and they spoke Afrikaans. A lot of us can understand and speak Afrikaans, but she even says, I speak the...
Yeah, that's different kind of Afrikaans.
I speak Buramach, you know?
Yeah. That's a yikes for me. Every time I'm like, oof.
Like, I'll say Nia and Via and stuff like that.
That's wild. Especially as like a Cape Colored. But if we bring it back to something a bit more recent, and we look at Fees Must Fall, just like my generation and the generation before us, our generation and the generation before us, there was even this accepted standard that now because you have access to tertiary education, you must pay for tertiary education. And very much because of the Fees Must Fall movement, people have started to look at, hey, actually, humanity has been passing information on for free because that's what we do. Like, why is it the norm to commoditize something as human as passing information on to somebody? As soon as you have a child, you teach them how to eat, how to drink, how to do things in the household, how to look after themselves. You teach them about health, you teach them about customs, traditions, and you pass on whatever information there is for them to survive. And now we've commoditized it, and to say, this is really weird, is rebellion.
Exactly. Fighting for your actual rights.
For education.
Your entitlements that you're naturally born for.
Which is wild. Like, hey, whoever wants to learn how to be a doctor to help heal people when they're sick, let's let everyone who wants to learn do that. Rebellious. We want to create scientific innovations. We want to practice law in case of disputes, and so that people can understand how to, and help other people who don't understand the law. Let's give people, how dare you? What?
We have law schools for that. You have to pay an extra few K after the degree. Don't. It is a wild thing.
We've commoditized what humans innately do, which is
need.
And it's just, it just shows that whether it's something as simple as your hair that comes out of your head, or a language that you speak, or wanting to pass on information, how the system that we're in how just doing what seems human is seen as an act of rebellion.
I think it's a it's a different form of control. Ultimately, when you want to control human beings down to that level, so it's everything from what, because that's a determining factor, what you learn, where you learn, and how you learn this, and that determines ultimately, as a human being, where it is you end up. Where I think you should have the flexibility to learn multiple things. I started out with
Can you
law,
say that again?
and I absolutely
Can you
hated
say,
it.
like, I know it's gonna hit me in layers. Can you say that again? Like, what you learn, how you learn determines?
What you learn, how you learn, and where you learn, right? Those things ultimately determine, as a human being, where and how it is you end up and move in life. Yes?
Yeah.
So if you are taught in a certain way, as an example, from your child development, the effects of that and how your parents teach you will still be evident when you're an adult, right?
for
Now
sure.
you take 12 years of just schooling into consideration, how you're taught, what it is you are taught, and where it is you are taught, all play a role in your adult life, right? So what I'm saying is, if something as simple as that, or what is perceived to be so simple, right, and wanting to be taught in a way where it actually is something that you go, okay, Shab, now I've had 12 years of education, I'd love to study law. It might not be with the intention to become a lawyer, but I should be able to go study law.
Right.
I studied law, and I was like, actually, this is not my vibe. And then I couldn't move from law onto something else, right? Because UWC was still pending me paying up my law degree. I had to do that for a long time while I was working a job before I could consider even doing something else again, right? And that consideration didn't come up for me until like much later in my life, when I was like, okay, cool, I'll lift up my chin now and see if I've got the budget to try and study to do that again for another 5 or 6 years while I'm trying to adult at the same time.
The system really has us thinking funny.
Literally, when you spoke about fees, it reminded me, I think I told you the story earlier, how when my mother was participating in protests, it was also about access to education in the 90s. And then when you think about the 2000s, it's not exactly like we weren't protesting for access to education then, especially quality education. And then for it to come back again with fees must fall. And now with the amount of time that has transpired between those years, the same youths that were fighting then are the same ones that are now telling us that we are the ones that must fall. And with fees must fall as well, because hey, yo, I was on the ground. I was on the ground, I got tear gassed. It was
But
wild.
if you realize how loopy it is, people got mad the other day when I said if I knew that I could skip 12 years and still have my matric and do a year of it, I would have. If I was given the choice to do that, I would have learned lots of other things in the 12 years. And if I had been given the choice to, now you don't have to do 12 years of going to school, go to primary school, go to high school, matriculate. You can do your matric in a year. After you're 18 years old, anyone can do and get their matric certificate in 1 year. But you've spent 12 years to accomplish the same thing, and nobody, when they get your matric certificate and have you certified, asks you if you did this in 12 years, if you did it actually in 14 years, or if you got this in a year. So to me now, if I could, I would have learned so much more in that space of time, and then use the year to get a matric certificate. But I probably would have learned a lot more languages. I would have learned basic things like what to do and what is the economy, how to function as a human being inside of it. Because one of the first things that happens to us, the second we are outside of that, is you are shoved into an economy that you don't understand. And one of the very frequent first things you do is earning money means getting into, like, you get into debt almost immediately. Because this is how you get ahead, right? But I know nothing about that. I know nothing about the economy, really, even though I've studied economics. I don't know anything about having a personal budget, even though I did accounting.
Yeah. And so I think for everybody listening and watching, what we want to accomplish here, and the reason we named the show How to Rebel, is because one of the first steps in rebellion is understanding what you are going against and understanding who you are. And so just in talking about things as simple as hair and education and languages, we're realizing how dizzy it is the way we see things right now. And so I'm just pointing that out because I'm thinking I want everybody listening to understand where we're going with this. And because it becomes so frustrating because you hear all these things and you highlight it all and everybody's like, I don't know what to do. And it's like, don't worry, we're going to get there. For now, we just want to open up the mind a little bit so you can start seeing the world for what it is in little examples and little case studies and start to take things apart for yourself, because once you crack your own mind open, the sky's the limit.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
there's so many, and I mean, we speak to them on lives on TikTok all the time. There's so many talented, like super smart people like Square and Cello and Tato, and like their minds are just insane. And I think if we can have conversations that stimulate those kind of minds to open up, like the application is endless.
And I don't think it is necessarily, because people are always asking, at least me, how to better move inside these systems, right? Somebody asked a question the other day, and I think they mentioned both you and I in it as well. And they were like, why aren't you in politics? It's because, truthfully, I'd probably say again, the system, right? Is that system right? Is the system right? I'm in leadership development, and I don't see a lot of leadership in those systems. To me, there's a weird boppity way of having control seem like it sits somewhere where it isn't. And a lot of people think it's in the government, but it isn't really. You know, so to me, it's not a way really for you to, or a system or a mechanism to affect real change or the type of change that I think is necessary. And that's why, to me, that vehicle is not the type of one. Even if you open the door, even if it's a limo, even if it's what, I will not use, and I don't think I'm ready to use that vehicle, really, because also once you're in it, it just feels like the car smells like R. Kelly sheets, and it's horrible.
What are your thoughts on that, Gugu? Like, because Jay says something like, we think power is where it isn't. Like, what's your thoughts on? Because I know that's the kind of thing that just sends your mind on the spiral. Like, you know?
No, the thing is, when I think of like power, there is the perception of power, which is how the society runs, and it's the things that we give power to, and then there's where actually the power lies. And I think this is why we're doing what we are doing, because the power actually lies with us. We have this thing that we need to be represented in some collective, which then will give us a space in this government that's already minimized, where we've been given this channel and this limited box that was never really meant to accommodate everyone. I mean, for serious sake, the reason that we're doing this is because people like us, people that are our age, are not even in government. We have some
whose grandfather is representing your rights in government, Darren? who's Appa Grootjies there?
I don't know, but I'm going to show you my
telling the
team's
world
Google
about
later.
we are
your
going to be paying for so
experiences.
many ministerial funerals in the next 10 years because none of these people want to give it up. They are old F, and that on its own is a form of rebellion. The fact that we as the youth are we are talking and trying to get space, but that's rebellion to them. That's why they even looked and infantilized our struggles. They infantilized the poverty of the youth. They infantilized the unemployment of the youth. Like, they're just kids. That's what they always do to us.
Yeah, like what Blade said about fees must fall.
Exactly. The students must fall. Students, as if students were not the reason that the state of emergency was instituted in the first place in Apartheid.
That
feel
one
like-
hit me in waves.
I feel like
That
when they took out Steve, they took out the last real leader that was representative of us. Everybody else after that was a nominated puppet.
Okay.
That's
Steve,
how I
Vito?
feel about
Oh,
it.
you
Yeah.
manyana, Chris Ani.
That's why if there was to be a conversation about leadership in government, I would say that was the last evident one that I had, and people can feel about Kata the way they do. But that's how I feel. He was a paid puppet. He was put there to play a role, to be a picture. And even he said, like, the struggle is not done, guys. It continues.
In another episode, we really need to speak about the impact of the leaders that we have. I don't want to say that we have had murdered and taken away from us.
But
And
if you did say it, it wouldn't be a lie.
yeah,
But that's the thing.
we at some point we need to have that conversation. Maybe not now, but like we also need to address how those who lead rebellions are just taken out.
But then also address what heroes are given for us to celebrate at the same time.
True.
At the same time.
So what would rebellion look like now? What is it? What in which context would an average person be able to say, I'm going to participate in not being part of, or I'm going to do these things, these small things, right? Not
Oh, you don't want to go to like systemic things.
listen.
I was like, okay, wait.
The last time we had this conversation, you stopped me from saying my idea.
Look, the thing is also it must be palatable. You know what I mean? Something simple, something simple. Here's why I say tiny things, small things in life. Because we all daily now, whether it is in the morning, in the evening, in the middle of your day, you think about load shedding, right? Not too long ago, the EFF invited the entire country to participate, right? Literally in an expression of how tired we are and had certain demands of the government to seize this. How many people actively participated because they thought on a day, right? Wasn't it a public holiday?
It was not.
I think it was a school
It was
holiday.
a day
The following
before,
day was
yes.
a public
Yeah.
holiday.
So even in that context, that there were so few people who participated in it, but the entire country is upset about it.
Yeah.
So to me, this was an opportunity for everybody to really express how they felt about this. But because of where it was coming from, right? How they felt about it, all of a sudden was something they could swallow. Now I'm asking, if something like that, like expressing that as a collective, we are tired of something that affects all of us, we aren't able to do that. And it was as simple as you just getting up and joining people in a peaceful protest, in a peaceful protest,
And there's
peaceful
police
protest, peaceful protest, right?
Hey.
Peaceful, where the army was deployed for a whole month for a peaceful protest at
That
our
happened one
expense.
day.
But what are those small things in life, in day-to-day life, where it forms part of us eventually rebelling against these systems that is ultimately just a different way of, it's a modern way of enslavement to me, because I don't have the freedom of flexibility to do with my life as I wish.
Ooh,
Still.
So I think
that
like
hasn't changed.
some of the ways, one of the ways for sure is accepting how people speak and speaking the way you speak. I understand why we code switch, but we need to try to collectively, you know what I mean? Let people remember where we from, where you are, like you on the continent of Africa. Relax. You don't want me. You know what I mean? Stop expecting others to have this Eurocentric sound, and stop putting that pressure on yourself. And then the same for how we
But
dress.
also, is in which country, a European country, have you found that, and I've worked with a lot of international and multinational companies, when I call Singapore, the person doesn't answer in English, right?
Okay.
When I call Germany, they don't answer in English. When I call that country, the phone will be answered
in the native tongue.
But here, it is an unrealistic expectation
Exactly.
to have the phone answered in anything except Morabas, good morning, sir.
Yep.
Why are we still there? Just to speak to that thing that you just mentioned about language.
Clothing.
Nowhere else in the world is it acceptable, right? It's not something that you're going to expect. French people, What are some of the ways that you would say rebellion should start? Well, those small things, that if we started there, the small ones.
It's weird, right? Because I think it requires a lot of self-reflection, really, when it comes to rebellion. Because to be quite honest about it, the things that we rebel against, or the things that they have been rebelling against, the things that we need as humans to survive, human rights, money for employment, workable places, safe places, right? But that's all a part of us trying to be who we are. So for me, rebellion starts in the heart. It starts from within. It starts with self-acceptance. It starts with self-expression. It starts with my tattoos and my piercings. It starts with how I dress, no longer to appease people, to accentuate parts of my bodies or anything like that for a person or whatever, but actually to my own taste. Then it comes in how I present myself at work and the jobs that I choose and where I spend my money, where I direct my resources. And that becomes how I influence my community, which then comes into TikTok and how we do our things over there. So it's not exactly like it's something we do every day without knowing because we are living as we are. And if who you are is outside of the norm, then you're going to be rebelling on all fronts. Like if you are outside of the hegemony of masculinity, you are living as a rebel as a woman. If you are outside the ridges of religion, you are living on the outside as an unbeliever, as a nonsense. If you are outside the paradigm of straight, you are a rebel and you're outside of the norm. So I think we rebel anyway by being who we are. I think honoring ourselves to the best of our abilities is basically how we rebel. Because there are people that are telling you have to do this and you have to go to school for 18 years. You have to. Then there are many people that haven't. That's a rebellion.
Yeah.
And they love using Bill Gates as an example. Like he wasn't a well-lubricated finance machine at home. But those things are rebellious. And it's crazy that we live in a society that tells us so much what to do. But the people we celebrate are people that have never done everything that they're supposed to do. All the time. Every time we look at history, rebellion, history, yay, woo, ah, yay. And then we're like, okay, sharp, let's wear our tattoos at church. Hold on. Okay, fine. Women have rights to their own bodies. Wait a minute. A woman, a traditional woman, must stay at home. So for me, it starts with us. It starts in the heart. It starts with being true.
I think that's the perfect place to pause for today. I think our next conversation we're gonna have a chat about. Well, I don't have any, but we can talk about tattoos and piercings.
Yes, absolutely. Because
Exactly. We can unpack the little
as
ways
much
that
as
it can be
we
done.
can say we're